Thank you guys for joining us. It's great to have you here. By way of introduction, let's start with Adrian on the far left. Adrian Sherrod is our VP of Sales. Great background in brick and mortar brokerage. Has done a lot of great things with big brands. And we're excited to have him here, especially on the Pit Labs team.
Thank you, Tyler.
Of course. Right to his left, to his left, is Hunter Stutz, one of our account analysts. To his left, going on, Brian Forsyth, one of our account managers, and myself, Tyler Allgeier. And we're here today to talk about, obviously, the second wave of COVID, or in some people's eyes, the continuation of the first wave, how that affects e-commerce, Amazon, brick and mortar retail sales, and what we can do and what we recommend as an agency specializing in e-commerce and brick and mortar to prepare for that. February, eMarketer, I'm reading some facts here. They forecasted U.S. retail would be up 2.8% for 2020 to $5.6 trillion in the U.S. Now they're saying there's going to be a 10.5% decrease for 2020 down to 4.9 trillion. So obviously a big flux, 2.8% up to 10.5% down. For e-commerce, they're saying that U.S. e-commerce is going to be up 18% this year. So to start off, my first topic that I want to cover with you guys is what have you guys seen? We'll start with Adrian with the brick and mortar, the effects of COVID on the global retail sales.
COVID was certainly an extremely challenging thing for a lot of brands to overcome if your only primary focus is to sell through distribution, stores and brick and mortar. If your focus for brick and mortar and your distribution is strictly on independent, small regional chains, you probably got hit the hardest. But if you had a strategy that you were focusing on some distribution to those big retailers, and food, drug, mass would be businesses like Target and Walmart, CVS, Walgreens and such. Those ones actually were able to be sustainable, if anything, experience some level of growth within those sections. So that's kind of one of the things that I noticed in brick and mortar. It's such a big focus for me, for our company. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So then Hunter and Ryan, obviously you're focused at Pit Labs on the Amazon e-commerce side. So can you guys talk a little bit about what you saw, maybe even leading up to COVID, kind of what we were expecting for 2020, then when COVID hit, what changed? Generally speaking, obviously we'll get into details later, but would you mind talking about that a little bit, starting with Hunter?
There's obviously a huge demand at Amazon in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So for the lack of a better term, call it a waterline, which was this minimum demand that we were expecting and seeing from Amazon. All of a sudden, COVID hits, and we see just a dramatic spike happen. And after things settle down a little bit, people get more accustomed to this new situation. It drops off again as expected. But the difference is, if this is the beginning waterline, this was the end waterline.
We definitely saw a lot more demand for Amazon. I mean, for obvious reasons. Retail stores are closed in large parts of the country. E-commerce is what customers turn to. So the flip side of that is, you do see higher demand, higher waterline, more people browsing that channel. But there was also challenges that came along with that.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, initially, the most obvious things were fulfillment, the supply chain at Amazon, which ended up hiring a substantial, over 100,000 people to help with those backlogs. But we also saw, also as a result of that, Amazon implement inventory restrictions. How much inventory can you send in? It used to be no limit. Amazon was now saying hard cap on this. Depending on your category, obviously they handled essentials versus non-essentials differently. But because of this general switch into e-commerce, you also saw brands putting more dollars into their Amazon strategy, more effort. And you saw brands focusing on Amazon that weren't even on Amazon before. Mm-hmm. So that led to more competition to also meet that higher demand that was there. But that means that your advertising campaigns are probably more expensive than they were pre-COVID. But then that inventory thing is something that Amazon is tried to change. And now with their recent announcements about Prime Day getting pushed back, we're kind of starting to see some of those limitations creep back in. So that's something we'll keep our eye on. But it definitely created challenges for brands to go along with the opportunities of higher demand across the board.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Looking back on, when COVID first started back in March, April, we saw Amazon reacting to a lot of things. Obviously, nobody knew it was coming, what it would entail, things like inventory slowdowns, inventory limitations. Are we seeing anything like that now? And do we have expectations for those kinds of things, in Q3, Q4?
Yeah, I mean, right now, end of July, we're already seeing inbound FBA shipments to Amazon take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. So knowing that that's happening already, I mean, I think it's safe to say that it's only going to get worse from here. So knowing that, plan ahead, start sending in your Q4 holiday, Prime Day, Cyber Monday inventory now, because if you decide to send it too late, it might be too late.
And I think a lot of this is also going to impact product launches, because when we talk about inventory limits, what that actually looks like is for new product launches. For a lot of these categories, the majority of categories are non-essential items. Amazon is saying for a quantity limit, it's going to be 3 months of cover. And I mean, that's algorithm based. That's not something you can talk to Amazon and try and work through and send in more than that. And that's something that just doesn't fit with a general Q4 inventory plan. 3 months of cover is what you would normally want for just the month of November. And specifically for brand new product launches, some of our clients, that inventory restriction is coming in at 200 units. Yeah. Amazon doesn't care if you could sell 200 in a day or in an afternoon. And so that's going to severely affect, the business you could be doing. You're leaving dollars on the table if you can't send in that inventory. And go ahead. I was going to say the best way to handle that is get those products launched on Amazon right now. Don't wait for a Black Friday, Thanksgiving product launch, which is what a lot of brands do with the normal retail schedule. This is just not a normal retail schedule this year. Get those products launched now on Amazon. They can have some sales history, some demand history, and then those Amazon algorithms can say, "Oh, you don't have any problem selling 200 units in 2 or 3 days. All right, here's how much you can send in for 3 months of cover." Yep.
Adrian, what kind of delays are you seeing, or things that brands should be aware of on the retail side, based on potential delays in brick and mortar?
When you're talking about new item launches, there's review periods, and there's certain specific times where you could present your specific item in your respective category, and then 6 months down the line is when they actually launch your item. So we're in August already, basically. If you're presenting your item today to a large chain like possibly Target or Walmart, there's almost absolutely no way that you're going to be able to generate some revenue this year. Maybe Walmart, they can work pretty quickly if it's an essential item. And same thing with Target and some other key retailers. But most of these key retailers, the sales cycles are extremely long. And so if you really, really wanted to generate some revenue and finish 2020 pretty strong, you need to start having those conversations now rather than later, because August, September is probably going to be your last chance.
Great points. So you touched on a lot of things, Ryan. Obviously, all you touched on great points. Marketing, supply chain, forecasting for future. Let's break that down a little bit, starting with the logistics aspect of Amazon. Ryan, I know you mentioned inventory limits. We're seeing that all over the place with our brands. As of time recording this, it's July 31st. We first noticed these inventory limitations about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Talk about inventory planning for Q3, what that looks like for brands, and I guess even before that, let's even talk about the holidays that are coming up. Right, you've got Prime Day that has historically been July in the middle of summer. It's a big Amazon event to kind of boost sales in a traditionally slow period of the year. They've not only moved Prime Day from originally July to September, they then pushed it back even further to October. So where historically it would be, okay, let's do a Prime Day lead up, Prime Day lead out, and then Q4, we're now seeing lead up, Prime Day, pedal to the metal, continuing through basically Christmas shopping, and then lead out. So how from an operational standpoint, how would you recommend brands approach that?
Yeah, this is an interesting scenario that Amazon's put us in, because originally Prime Day was meant to kind of bridge that gap in the retail calendar in the summer when no one's spending money. And because of COVID, this has been pushed literally right next to Black Friday, all of the holiday craziness. So what we're seeing now is, generally speaking, for most categories on Amazon, a inventory limitation of 3 months of cover. And so what that's doing is especially hard to forecast for brands. If you are already selling, say, for example, $10,000 a month, I want to have at least 3 times that in there for the month of November. And these Amazon inventory restrictions are going to seriously hamper our ability to do that.
Oh, wow.
Especially with the inventory restrictions, Prime Day in October, and then November having obviously Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then last minute deals in December. Amazon inventory is going to be at capacity at their warehouses. So, I mean, I've seen pictures. I'm sure plenty of people have of semi trucks backed up miles long, waiting to deliver their inventory to Amazon warehouses, getting ready for just the regular Black Friday rush. I want to say the number, don't quote me, is Amazon's opened 33 new warehouses this year, 2020, which is going to help with that throughput rate. But at the same time, everyone's trying to send as much inventory as they can. Amazon's restricting that inventory. And at the end of the day, inventory is the most crucial part to Amazon's success. You have the best product, you have the best looking detail pages, and the most efficient advertising campaigns reaching the right customers. And if you don't have inventory there to ship, none of it matters. So that's going to be the biggest thing, that if you are not thinking about that now in July or the first week of August, you're going to seriously be hindering yourself come Q4.
And then Hunter, how would you recommend brands, bridge that gap? Obviously, a lot of this is reliant on FBA capacity or fulfillment by Amazon, Amazon's warehousing, operations, the trucking that comes with that. That's putting a lot of eggs in somebody else's basket. In this case, it's Amazon's. What would you recommend to brands? And maybe we've already done this for some of the brands that you work with. The first round of COVID, what would you recommend going to Q3, Q4 to help alleviate some of these potential concerns?
Yeah, so obviously there's two different fulfillment methods on Amazon. Well, technically three, but we'll talk about two: FBA and FBM. So fulfilled by Amazon and fulfilled by merchant or seller fulfilled. So as Amazon was making kind of these critiques to combat all this increase of traffic and demand when COVID hit, we started implementing a hybrid system of this FBA and FBM fulfillment. Because we actually noticed too that another thing that Amazon changed at the blink of an eye was giving these FBM offers the buy box versus the FBA. Because FBA was seeing, even with Prime shipping, the Prime wasn't actually a 2-day fulfillment anymore. It was anywhere from a week up to 30 days, depending on the category you were selling in. So Amazon themselves recognizes this and started giving the buy box to these FBM offers, realizing that these brands are able to get these shipments and orders to the customers faster than they even could. So that was one thing that we noticed that Amazon changed to try to benefit the seller. So I wouldn't be surprised if we were to see something like that happen again in the next couple of months if turmoil hits again.
Yeah. I know something that we really push for at Pivot Labs is having an omni-channel strategy, right?
It's extremely important.
So obviously when you're buying in retail, something that we always talk about brands is what is the impact of, a shopper looking at your brand on a Target shelf impact Amazon or Walmart.com or wherever you're selling your own .com. So maybe Ryan, you can talk a little bit about, the omni-channel strategy, what happens in a brick and mortar location, how that affects Amazon, why it's important to have all these pieces working together.
I mean, obviously at Pivot Labs, we'd love to help brands grow their Amazon business, but at the end of the day, we want you to grow your entire business. And so part of that is making sure that customers have the easiest path forward to buying your product as possible. And maybe with all these fulfillment delays, maybe it's more competition from other competitors bidding on keywords and advertising campaigns on Amazon. Maybe they can find your product. Maybe they don't decide to purchase now. But if they can still find it on a shelf somewhere, maybe that's them finding it on Walmart.com, on eBay, on other e-commerce channels as well. It's still super important to reach customers with Amazon advertising and have great quality Amazon detail pages so the customers can research that. Maybe it's not showing up in your attribution models for your advertising campaigns, but those are still dollars in your pocket at the end of the day if you're getting the sale.
Hunter, could you talk a little bit about how COVID has affected advertising on Amazon, whether it's from PPC or DSP or otherwise?
So being able to be diverse with how you were reacting with your campaigns, and more importantly, making sure that, and this is a point for planning for a second wave, is making sure that you have your campaigns set up specific enough where you can make these minor details to be able to fluctuate for that.
I think a lot of people are probably watching this and they're looking for an answer of, okay, but what does that mean numbers wise?
Yeah.
And here's some things we do know. What we don't know, there could be a second wave, there could be a third wave. we will see.
Yeah.
What we do know is, in general, Q4, much more traffic on Amazon, and it's more competitive. So brands end up spending, we see 20 to 40% increased ad spend, depending on the category.
Yeah.
That's a normal year. And just from COVID so far this year in 2020, we've seen increased ad spend in non-peak, I mean Q2 mainly. And that's from the increased competition, more sellers, more people going after it, that we've already talked about. So we've already seen an increased ad spend there. Those two things combined, I would plan on increasing your ad spend in Q4 by at least 50%. This is not necessarily saying you'll spend that much, but you need to have that budget allocated.
Exactly.
Because if you are losing those defensive keywords, or if you're not reaching those customers around the site, someone else will be. And you need to be ready to spend. Otherwise, Q4 is going to be a complete bust.
And also realizing at the same time, too, that maybe if you're looking at your 2019 data, your ROI is going to be completely different this year for what you were planning for. Because obviously Amazon's a pay-to-play space, but the influx of demand and new competitors coming in is just going to drive how much you have to spend to be able to even maintain.
Mm-hmm. Another area that we saw at Pitted Labs a lot of success with was DSP. I'll start kind of talking a little bit about what that is for the people listening. But Ryan, I know that's an area that you really love and you do really well in, so I'll let you talk about it as well. DSP basically stands for Demand Side Platform. It's Amazon's programmatic advertising engine. When I talk to brands about it, as we're talking, hey, this is an option for you, I affectionately refer to it as the love child between Facebook ads and Google AdWords.
And not very many people have ever heard about it in the first place.
Yeah, so
which
it's
is
a great
surprising.
opportunity.
Yeah.
So Facebook ads is audience based, right? They built based off of certain actions or demographics, whatever it is. Google AdWords has the value of showing outside of whatever key website you're on. So Amazon DSP marries both those aspects. So we can build audiences based off of shoppers' actions on Amazon, whether it's viewed certain products, maybe they have a certain historic shopping lifestyle preference, maybe they viewed certain categories, maybe they haven't done any of those actions. You can negative target those audiences. But in COVID, especially when it first started hitting in March, April, at least in the US, we saw a huge shift in the algorithm on Amazon. There's, that's a whole nother conversation in of itself, but it was being tweaked for a variety of reasons. And that impacted PPC advertising significantly, being algorithm-based. DSP on the other side, you're either in an audience or you're not. Either I have viewed that product or I have not. Mm-hmm. There's no really gray area there. So what we found is on the homepage of Amazon.com, both desktop and mobile, whatever, Amazon shifted because they could not keep up with the amount of physical product sales that were going on the website at the time. Obviously, with hiring over 100,000 people in a month, they shifted from physical product sales to selling digital products, Kindle, Audible books, TV shows, whatever it is they have.
Yeah.
The only thing that was a physical product above the fold, even probably a couple scrolls below that, was the DSP slot.
One spot. That was it.
Yeah. So for me, obviously we're working tons with brands that do this. I was constantly seeing our brands on the homepage of Amazon.com, one of the most trafficked websites in the United States. That was extremely effective. How awesome is that to know that you are the only physical product to be purchased or purchasable on the homepage of Amazon.com? Mm-hmm. So that's my prologue there. Ryan, would you mind talking about some of our strategies around DSP, how we use it?
DSP is hard to use because it is something you need to gain access to. If you want to use DSP, you either have to work directly with Amazon. The barrier to entry there is pretty high, depending on promotions or pushes that Amazon is doing. It can cost 30, 40, 50 grand per month of investment to work with Amazon.
And that's minimum,
DSP.
right?
Yeah.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum. And it's mainly geared at brands that are spending $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, large marketing campaigns. The other alternative is an agency like Pitted Labs has access, and we work with Amazon internal account executives to run multiple clients DSP campaigns through the portal. And so that is something that we offer. And DSP is something you can realistically run with as little as a couple $100 a week.
So to tie it all back, and we're talking a lot about brick and mortar, Amazon, but we really haven't talked about some other e-commerce. We talked about omni-channel. But with COVID, a lot of things are kind of being thrown in the air. What's going to happen? Where's the dust going to settle? In times like that, I think about, retirement savings, having, a stock manager or portfolio manager manage a retirement fund. One of the most common things you'll always hear is diversify your portfolio, right? So that's something that I know we've started implementing very heavily post-COVID, second wave, whatever you want to call it, is to start having brands diversify their quote-unquote e-commerce portfolio. Hunter, I know that's one area that you've been working with a lot of brands on. So would you mind talking about what we do in that area?
So we've seen a lot, and kudos to the timing and everything of Walmart, Walmart.com and their seller center, because we've seen a lot of people not necessarily take their selling opportunities from Amazon strictly to Walmart, but add Walmart as an additional platform. And Walmart just partnered with Shopify to make the integration
More seamless.
It's like
plug-in.
Very smooth. Yep. Another benefit of Walmart.com is the application process is a lot more thorough. For example, you have to get approved through Walmart.com to be able to sell. Yes, you do on Amazon as well, but it's a lot more thorough on Walmart. So there's not as many sellers that are getting access to Walmart. So when you do, it creates just that much more of an opportunity. And I think the number for Walmart is like 170 million unique customers.
Yeah, and Walmart.com right now reminds me a little bit about, the gold rush days of Amazon, 7-8 years ago, where I know firsthand folks who basically you could start a private label brand and then it would not be outside of the realm of possibility to be a $500,000 brand within a year. Walmart.com reminds me of that, not just for private label sellers, but for brands. It's such a huge opportunity right now, especially with Amazon losing a little bit of their brand equity. I know we talked about operations. We talked about the Prime badging, which is probably the core of Amazon's sales channel. Does not necessarily mean 2-day shipping anymore, or it does now, but March, April, it did not mean.
Who knows?
Yeah, so it ended up being 30-day shipping in some cases. So there's a lot of trust being taken from Amazon and shifted to other places. I mean, right now, Jeff Bezos is talking to Congress about antitrust issues along with other big tech companies. So I feel like there's a lot of real opportunities for brands to shift and diversify their portfolios.
You need to make it easy for the consumer to get your product. And the easiest way is to make sure that it's basically available almost everywhere. Hence the omni-channel strategy, right? Really, really, really making sure that if you only have your own website and that's the only thing you're doing, you have to start thinking, hey, if COVID second wave happens again, I need to be prepared for this. And a good rule of thumb would be is to make sure you're already having those conversations with these chains, or you're starting to look at your strategy on Amazon. If you haven't done it yet, you really need to start on that now.
See, a story I like sharing with people is, my grandmother, in her 70s, typically with older generation, they are very used to buying, in a physical store. I mean, that's just how the world has worked for them. Amazon has been around, but they just haven't felt the need to make that shift. What we saw with COVID was because a lot of stores initially, at least in the US, closed their doors, people had to buy staple goods from somewhere. That was the first immediate spike, was in those staple goods, the necessities that people needed from Amazon, whatever. They had it shipped to their door. I know my grandmother was one of those people. She could not get the things she needed from the grocery store because it was closed, or the corner market. So, obviously told her about Amazon.com. And she started buying her paper towels from Amazon, not realizing how easy it was.
Just press a button.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Stores are opened up now. She doesn't feel the same need to go to that corner market. She doesn't need to go, driving the car, which I don't think she should be doing. But
I think that highlights a key benefit of COVID, all things considered here, is that it's also bringing new customer bases to these platforms. It is a fact that, that aging generation, customers 60 years plus, whatever age it wants to be, that is the fastest growing demographic in the world right now because that population is bigger.
Shifting quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that story really highlights, I think, a group of customers that wasn't shopping on Amazon 8 months ago. And now, in this case, it's because they didn't really have any other options. Now they're shopping on Amazon.
Well,
and they know how convenient it is. they may or may not go back to shopping how they used to.
Mhm.
Yeah, to add to that as well, there's a stat for Amazon.com and Walmart saying that on Amazon.com, new to Amazon.com users since COVID, I believe about 53% of them have said if everything gets back to normal how it was, they're going to continue still doing
To
everything
purchase,
on Amazon. Yep. And same for Walmart at about a 23 to 25%. So this forceful change has been a huge impact for some of these people, mostly older demographics.
So we've got a lot of things to consider here, a lot of things for our listeners to chew on. But to cap it up, I'll let you talk for maybe a minute on what your final parting thoughts are, knowing that it's a very high likelihood a second wave of COVID will happen if it's not happening already. What they can do to prepare. Ryan, Hunter, specifically around the e-commerce space, and then Adrian on the brick and mortar, looking for the rest of the year and even to 2021.
Yeah, I think we talked a lot about diversifying. That was a really hot topic word. Talked a lot about diversifying your fulfillment models, but also we talked a lot about advertising. And you have to diversify there as well. Just pay-per-click, but also in DSP. And one thing to keep in mind is Q4 used to be a 3 to 4 week span, really, right? We're adding Prime Day into that. Consumers are going to be spending during that entire time. They're going to have to be spending those dollars wisely. And with all the additional competition on Amazon, those promotions and those customer dollars are going to be more of a premium. So my recommendation, use all available advertising methods. And if you need to support that advertising budget, shift some of those dollars out of your promotional schedule into advertising, especially if it's tough to get inventory into these places. Why are you driving sales of discounted units when you could be out of stock on that unit in 2 weeks when there's still customers looking at your pages?
Oh, yeah.
So really diversify, and I would say focus advertising dollars where they need to be, more so than promotional dollars.
Just be ready on a whim to be able to adjust, because we never know what's going to happen. And if something does happen from Amazon, it can happen overnight.
Yep.
So prepare.
Yeah, and part of that being nimble is making sure that you plan to be nimble.
100%.
With fulfillment models, if you need to be nimble and shift from FBA, you can't be nimble to shift to FBM unless you plan to have FBM.
Exactly.
You can't be nimble to shift advertising budget from offensive to defensive if you don't have a defensive. So think about these things now, if you haven't already, to make sure that you can be nimble if you need to be.
Yep.
Exactly.
I'm going to reiterate some of the stuff that we're saying, but I'll try and kind of summarize it. You have to have both a fulfill by merchant option and a fulfill by Amazon option. Right now, it's looking like Q4 with Prime Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then the holiday shopping. If you're not thinking about maximizing your inventory on some of these e-commerce platforms like Amazon and shipping them early with the expectations that it's probably going to be delayed, you really, really, really need to plan and forecast for that delay, because it's probably going to happen.
Delay, yep.
And so
delay up to 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
We've even started to see right now.
you have to have an omni-channel presence. Regardless of the cost for brick and mortar is extremely expensive. But if you're only selling on Amazon, you need to consider reselling on other websites and opening wholesale distribution. If you're only selling on your website, you need to consider start selling on Amazon now and other websites and opening wholesale distribution. And the third one, if you're only selling in wholesale distribution with chains, you need to really start looking at improving the efficiencies of your direct-to-consumer business on your own website and your Amazon or Walmart.com business.
We obviously, this is what we do day in, day out. We love what we do. We love working with brands. Brands, if they have any questions, obviously they reach out to us. This is something we do. We're in it because we love it.
Mhm.
People are more than welcome to call us anytime, right? Talk about their strategies, ask us questions, bounce ideas off of us. If nothing else, just bounce ideas off of us, get our thoughts on things. And it's something we always invite brands to.
We'll have this same conversation with your specific brand and how it impacts you.